Welcome to the Grow Podcast. My name is John King, and I am the host of the Grow Podcast for the Agronomy segment. Today, we're going to talk a lot about what's happening in the overall fertilizer and chemical markets, and then we're going to kind of bring it up with our agronomic team to talk about what we're seeing in the field initially right now on some early yield results, and then kind of rounding up what we saw in August with some of the dry temperatures and how those crops finished. So I'm going to have Dan and Brad here with me to talk about that. And then finally, we're going to kind of finish with talking a little bit about our ProCoat product and why it's so important for you here at this fall. All right, so looking at the market update, this is my favorite part of the podcast because it's really me getting to explain to everybody, what's happening in the markets, where we're seeing them going. Overall, the fertilizer markets from really back in June when I had Josh on the podcast with us, or maybe it was July, we talked a lot about the value, the inherent value for the farmer to be buying for fertilizer products for this fall, getting them down, and then selling grain against it. From where we were there to where we're at today, those prices have moved up pretty significantly, for the exception of potash. And I would say urea's yo-yoed around, but back then a lot of our call out or call to action was, get with your local retailer, get with your account lead or your Growth Solutions Center specialist here at Landus, and really talk about, what prices we had, getting them locked in and looking at that. For the most part, I would say everybody listen to us. We probably have the biggest sales book we've ever had at this part of the fall. So that, it really showed the, opportunity to acquire affordable crop nutrition products and really position yourself for the best opportunity to grow big yields next year. The other thing I would say is it's, when you look at overall affordability, we got products to the point where they were extremely affordable back in July. And really spurred that grower market to come forward and buy that stuff. So, where we're at today. So I look back, July, very good opportunity for farmers to buy. Where we're at today is maybe a little bit of a different scenario. Obviously, we've seen corn and soybean prices come off quite a bit. But the other part about that is we've seen fertilizer prices drift quite a bit higher. The one that I look at that's drifted the most higher is ammonia. I look back to 2 months ago, 3 months ago, 4 months ago, sitting in here and saying, and really talking to everybody about, hey, when retailers come out with ammonia prices, don't blink, just buy. For the most part, everybody did that. Today, where we're at is we're at prices that are probably, they're not as high as anything. They're still affordable relative to what we've been used to with $1,000+ ammonia. But retail values are somewhere in the $700, $750, $760, somewhere around that, compared to, $250 less when I would say really when it first came out, in that $500 to $550 range. So, when we look at where the market is today versus then, it's really evaluated immensely to the upside. And a lot of that just has to do purely to grower demand. The other side of that too is we saw a big uptick in overall global prices. So when we look back to June pricing globally, we were probably at a point where we were hitting 3-year lows. And overall, the global market reacted to that and began buying a lot of ammonia. So what we had happening there was a lot of people stepping in and restarting some of their industrial capacity, whether it be on chemical production or even just some finished good stuff that consumers buy. A lot of people began restarting some of their production lines that were down when we had $1,000 ammonia costs because they were not cost competitive anymore. I think when I look at the ammonia market now, the biggest watch out to the upside or to the downside is really how much do we get on this fall. We know across central Iowa, western Iowa, eastern Iowa, even most of Illinois, we've been extremely dry. I'm sitting here on the 25th of September. We had some nice rains here last week, but that's not going to be enough to really get us to that next level of where we have the ability to seal products and really get ammonia to really work in the soil like we want it to for fall application. The other thing is, from my time at Landus the last 3 years, I have never seen as big a window to put down ammonia as I have these last 3 years. To say that we're always going to be that lucky to run ammonia past Thanksgiving, I have a hard time to believe, but I hope we do this year. I think the biggest thing is when you're looking at it, for those that have got really good locked-in prices, be looking to get that stuff down. Ask if you have to, ask your retailer to help you get it down. We're in a pretty opportune position right now to have a really nice fall run as long as the weather abides by it. And for those that are maybe need some help getting it down, don't be afraid to ask, and make sure your stuff gets down. The other product that's really had a big time increase has been phosphates. When I look at the phosphate market, there's a lot of dynamics happening there. Obviously, for those that have been listening, we had our countervailing duties that were enacted probably 2.5, 3 years ago that eliminated the ability for Moroccan phosphates and Russian phosphates to come to the United States due to dumping issues. When you look at that, I'm going to say 2 to 3 years out now, the Department of Commerce has now sent that back to the International Trade Commission to reevaluate those duties. A lot of the reason we've seen prices spike is purely due to our limited ability to source product from the rest of the world. The United States, as a producer of phosphate, has been going down for the last 10 years consistently. We're not producing anymore. We're never going to produce more than what we did 10 years ago. We're probably never going to produce more than what we did last year. So, as we continue to see this drop in phosphate production here domestically, we're going to have to source it globally from those that are producing it. And unfortunately today, until we open up supply coming from Morocco, Morocco has 500 years of phosphate supply. They are going to be the world leader in phosphate production for as long as phosphate's produced. What has happened now with the countervailing duties going back to the International Trade Committee, they have 3 to 6 months to either say we are going to lower the tariff on Moroccan phosphates or completely eliminate them. My opinion, since they are going back to them, there's going to be significant reduction in either overall tariff prices or completely removing them completely. For us in the U.S. market, that would be a huge win for overall phosphate price stability. Today, we're probably $150 a ton premium to the Brazilian market for overall phosphate prices because all of that Moroccan and Russian product continues to flow there. Really, they're bombarding that market because it's really their only market they can go to. So when you look at it, as an advocate for our U.S. farmers, all it's doing, these duties are doing, is they're making the Brazilian farmer more competitive globally with the ability to source affordable phosphates. So, you have our commitment at Landus. We're very vocal about, getting some of this duty lowered or completely removed, just to allow a little bit more of a free trade market to surface here. And lastly, what I would say on the overall UAN market's probably the next one. That's probably the biggest one as a grower. If you still have not locked in UAN for spring, that's something you really need to start evaluating as the opportunity. The prices are up significantly from where they were. We're probably looking at a $100 increase on UAN prices, but they're still at a 50% discount to last year. So overall, when we look at it, that's something everybody needs to be a little bit more mindful of. Yes, prices are up, but UAN prices are still drastically different than what they were last year. The biggest thing I would say on UAN prices and where they're at, urea is still a pretty big premium to UAN. So there's really no room for that price to move down. Urea has to do all the work to the downside to get UAN to move further down. And what I really think what we've created is a very stable UAN market moving forward with limited downside, but probably not a ton of upside either. So therefore, when you're looking at it, it's probably something you want to look at. If you picked up some ground and you don't have enough fall ammonia booked yet, I probably wouldn't be looking at booking additional fall fertilizer today. I'd get down what you got, and I would look for an opportunity in spring to buy something probably less than today, especially on ammonia. Okay, pivoting for a couple more minutes I got left. We're going to talk about chemical markets. If you're a grower listening to me today, the chemical market is giving you an opportunity to really lower your costs on your overall chemical expenses. We have seen pretty drastic downside in base glyphosate prices, base glufosinate prices, bifenthrin, generic fungicides, really metallochlors. All these products that have been very high, hard to get the last few years, that market has completely shifted in the last 3 months to where everybody has inventory and everybody wants to get rid of inventory. So, if I'm a grower today, I'd be very, very pointed on wanting to know my alternatives for buying chemicals, okay? There's a lot of good branded opportunities. There's a lot of good generic opportunities. My opinion is you want to fit yourself into the middle with a little bit of both lower your cost on some of the branded stuff, but also still maintain some of the premium products that are out there in the market that truly deserve that premium in the market. So those are the biggest things I would say from my overall market update that I'd be paying attention to. And as always, feel free to give me a call or anybody at the Grow Solution Center to talk further about what we're seeing and how we can get you efficiently supplied for next year. With that, we're going to kind of move over and bring Dan and Brad in and talk about what we're seeing out there in the field. All right, now for our portion that we always love. I love bringing in Brad and Dan for kind of our agronomic roundup. I think with this point of the year, it's sitting here September 25th. We've got combines rolling in central Iowa. From a lot of what we look at the numbers on harvest progress here in Des Moines here for the grain guys, we're about 8% of harvest underway. So we're just kind of touching into it. But obviously we're getting some early yield results back, and it's probably a little bit better than what I would have thought. So we're going to talk a little bit about that and kind of an overall, what we're seeing from fall field harvest notes. And then we're really going to dive into a lot about fall fertility plans. That's kind of right at the center of what we're doing right now with, getting ready to get in the field and start spreading dry. When I look at the overall book of business that we have at Landus, we're really good. We have a bunch of dry fertilizer sales on the books. Obviously, our customers looked at the yield results that they thought they were going to have and wanted to prepare for that. So good time to kind of give some pointers and recommendations on what we're seeing. So, guys, kind of looking at the past. So we're going to do a little bit of the look at the past, and this is really a great example for our farmers while you're in the combine. Grab a little notebook, write down some notes of what you're seeing as you're harvesting. But, I think one of the key things that we all kind of were talking about amongst ourselves prior to getting ready to do the podcast today was weed control. And, there's been varied results on weed control across our entire geography, and really want you guys to kind of give your opinion on what should growers be thinking about if they had poor control this year or varied results, and what is an evaluation that they need to be making for next year?
Yeah, I think one of the things that it's an opportune time to make note of when you're in the combine, looking at the fields and the weed control in particular, did you have any escapes? It's a great time to make note of it. So after harvest, you can kind of circle back and evaluate what worked, what didn't work. Was it the rate? Was it the timing? Was it the nozzle setup that we were using, the tips? Seeing varied differences in that. And then I think part of it might be the opportunity to discern is there a resistance issue coming up. Mm-hmm. So just make those notes. A lot of the software packages that we have today give you the ability to drop a note or put a pin on it on the go. But now's a great opportunity, a great time to make those notes and observations as you're going across the field.
Yeah, and I would say early initial results, I mean, obviously you look back to July, June timeframe, we had a lot of growers that were not super impressed with their overall herbicide plans. One thing that I think that we're really, very committed to doing here right now is trying to evaluate what the right setup is. Whether it's corn or whether it's beans. This year I probably had more remarks on corn that I've had in a long time on poor weed resistance. And at the end of the day, Callisto by itself is not a good strategy on corn. I think we continue to look at, obviously dicamba is a big thing that we always talk about in a negative term, but I think we're at the point where, we're back to dicamba on corn. And if you really want to have success on spraying weeds, you're going to have dicamba in corn. When I look at prices, as in next spring on beans, it's Enlist and Liberty. That's kind of my opinion of where we're going to have to go to. Those prices are less than half of what they were a year ago. So, those are the big opportunities. Dan, I just kind of you've been obviously out in the fields a bunch. What's some of your remarks that you're continuing to see?
Well, I'm going to shift just a bit. We're going to talk about soybeans, but we just had results from Farmville research plot. And fascinating because where we did the high yield, higher input side, we averaged 82 bushels. Yep. Fantastic in a year like this year. Just across the road where we had our plot, we had 38 varieties. We averaged in the 70s, so there's that difference. But then within that plot, we had 12 bushel differences between some of the Peking and some of the PI 88. And right in the area where we found the cysts, June 9th and we reported that to everyone and said, hey, we're finding cysts in 9 out of 10 plants. It's becoming a reality, guys. That soybean cyst nematode is having an impact on the PI88s and managing that, not only with using P-King, but there are other seed treatments and there are other products that help to reduce the cyst count. But cysts are going to be the number one stress that we have to focus on. If we're gonna get bean yields above 50 bushels, and there have been some guys that are getting 50, 55, and then in the same area where in our high yield, where we put several products to it, and some will be available next year, up to 80. So there are differences, and he pays attention to the details. As Iowa State coach says, you win in the margins sometimes, you win in doing the process, like Saturday's game. Well, that's kind of what we saw with this result.
I think at the end of the day, what we've been able to prove this year is beans are something that if you're not going to invest in that crop, then you're gonna settle for 50 to 60 bushel beans. He who spends the money on them is going to be the one that takes it from 80 to 90 bushel beans, because a lot of the initial, I'm going to say, bean yields that we've got, especially in that, I'm going to call it that Highway 141 corridor where we had really nice rains for the most part of the year. The guys that were very high management on those beans are seeing something very similar in that 81, 82, 83 bushel beans versus, again, somebody that, didn't maybe do the extra nutritionals, the higher dollar seed treatments, stuff like that. When you really put it on a true ROI, those products are costing you less than a bushel of beans. Every instance you go out there, you're spending less than a bushel of beans, but anybody will spend less than a bushel of beans to get a 10-to-1 return on that. And I think really when I look at it and what we're trying to build for next year with the products that are coming out of Boone, the products that we're recommending it's a systematic approach to high yield beans. And we're going to spend a lot of time on that. So, mark your calendars. We're going to spend a lot of time on that with the two individuals in here about what is that systematic approach on beans to extract high yield beans. Wasn't there a new record set here a couple weeks ago for 200 bushel beans in Georgia? Again, they got to it because it's under irrigation. They're throwing everything under the sun at it, but I can guarantee you that return on 200 bushel beans is better than anything they spent on it. So that's the exciting part that we have and that we're bringing within our Acre Edge lineup of products that we can really affect bean yields for sure.
And John, I think anybody that hauls beans into Ralston, which is it's very profitable both for our customers and for Landus itself. Anybody that hauls into Ralston needs to come to the series of meetings we're going to have after the first of the year looking at how do you improve yields. If we improved yields 5 bushels an acre, the return on that ROI is huge, and we can do it. We're seeing it in some of these preliminary results in Farnhamville and then in other areas. And we haven't even brought them all the exciting new products yet. We just started to test them. So this is an exciting time to be growing soybeans.
Well, and I think the biggest thing is when you see the shift too, obviously we talk about it a lot on the Grain Podcast. Any meeting we have as a company, when people come in, we talk about all this new crush demand that's coming to the United States. That is going to require us to increase our average bushels per acre significantly to keep up with the demand that we're going to see. So, I think those are the biggest things long-term that we really got to focus on is, how do we extract the total amount of margin out of beans as much as possible? So when we really look at some of the other issues that we saw this year is overall crop standability has been a huge issue. Again, in my time at Landus, I don't think I've ever talked about rootworm issues as much as I have this year, even with a lot of the new genetics that are out from some of the hybrid companies. We're still seeing a lot of issues. So, when you guys are out there evaluating some of these products, like what are you seeing? What's some of the mentality that guys have to have when they come into next year on rootworm controls?
There is no easy button to push. And in a lot of cases, we understand, if a person has livestock, you're kind of tied into the corn. You have to have the feed. But in those situations, and if you've got rootworm pressure, especially heavy rootworm pressure, and you're corn on corn because you have to be, the trait alone probably is not going to keep you protected enough. Keep in mind, under those really heavy pressure levels, the rootworm still has to take a bite out of that root. And so you're going to have the opportunity for more disease to get in there. You're going to have root pruning. Some of those problematic issues that come up later season: standability, compromised stock quality. We're already starting to see a lot of that out in the fields. Dan's been out in all the plots doing a great job collecting data on different hybrids and their stock strength later in the season. We've got some great spectral imagery that we took of all of our plots where we can really see late season which of the hybrids and varieties were able to tolerate the dry stress conditions, which didn't. So it'll be really interesting to get back to yield data and then overlay that. But when it comes to the rootworm, there is no easy button.
Yeah.
In those situations where a person's really kind of tied to the grain, you have to have the grain for the livestock, and you're having some issues, and maybe it's yield or standability or other issues. Now is the time to think about what the plan or what are the needs for next year. Maybe it's going to be an insecticide in addition to the traded product.
That would be my recommendation. I look at it, and you see all this extended diapause situations in soybeans going to corn. A lot of everybody's been, I would say most everybody's looked at it as like, the way to get rid of rootworms is just rotate it. My personal opinion is, one, there is some new technology coming out for in-furrow liquid insecticide. BASF has a new product coming out called Nerisma. It's a new frac group. It's an opportunity to evaluate new products. Not going to be cheap by any means. I'm just going to say it now. It is not going to be cheap, but it's trying to solve a solution that is pretty tough right now. The other side of it, too, is when I look at it is, even if you're planting a Smart Stacks Pro, a Vor seed, some of these high caliber below ground opportunities, generic liquid bifenthrin as an opportunity to just help beat them back a little bit more, it is going to be ridiculously cheap. So you think about a $6 an acre in-furrow application to just help beat back rootworms. I mean, to me, it's like, whether it's an AM, whether it's rotated, whatever it may be, why not? I mean, the cost to yield drag versus the cost of application is so significant that I think it's something that, really controlling rootworms to me long-term it's a managed approach of top genetics, okay? You got to plant the best hybrids to keep them back, in-furrow liquid insecticide or insecticide period, could be dry insecticide, and hitting them again at tassel. I mean, that's the only way I think we're going to continue to really beat back those numbers is we have to have a mentality that we're treating rootworms at every opportunity.
John, your comment about genetics is really key because I spent so much time, as Brad mentioned, in plots the last 3 weeks and measuring differences in plant health, even when fungicide was utilized, and then digging up plants and looking at root types. It may not sound like much, but just a bigger rooted product that has a better chance to regenerate roots after they've been fed on. And I also think the individuals that used growth regulators like Radiate to build just that little bit better root. It's the few things that we do in addition that make sometimes a difference between a plant standing and a plant falling over.
Well, I'd say that almost falls a little bit into the bean cycle as well, where you're seeing a lot of this nematode issues. I mean, Radiate or a PGR, anything that's going to really help develop root growth. I mean, we're seeing, to me, it's almost like an automatic right now. There's no such thing as like trying to prove an ROI. It is literally an automatic for return on investment because it's such a low dollar cost, entry cost into getting it on the acre. It's more of like the way I look at it, we sell a product called C+ graphite. You look at Radiate. Those two alone, you can spend $6.50 an acre on. And all it is I don't look at it as, I'm starting to look at stuff a little bit differently from the standpoint of yield enhancement. Okay. Every bag of corn you open has 600 bushel potential. Okay. And is it Bilo from Illinois that always talks about the 7 wonders of the corn world? Weather's such a big determinant. All these things are big determinative. When I look at products like these, it's not so much how are we growing the yield, it's how are we saving that top line potential. It's all about eliminating what's ever going to knock us down to the bottom. And I think it's a shift in the industry that we have to take a little bit of. It's not if we're starting at 600, I'm applying these products to maintain that maximum potential of those hybrids, because the hybrids that we have today versus 10 years ago, the potential's there if you give it the opportunity. So it's really about looking at how do I maintain that maximum potential for that crop. And that's what I love about what we're doing with our acre edge products and the manufacturing plant at Boone is everything we're geared toward is about maximizing the potential of that hybrid and keeping the cup full instead of, letting the water fall out the bottom.
I think of soybean cyst nematode in soybeans in particular as having high cholesterol.
Yeah.
If you have high cholesterol, what's the doctor do? He gives you medication to lower your blood pressure because you can't get as much blood through your veins, right? Well, if you've got soybean cyst nematode in the roots infecting the roots, the plants can't absorb and move water and nutrients as efficiently because, well, you've plugged the artery.
Yep.
And so some of these products are doing a great job of helping that plant be more efficient in its water and nutrient use efficiency and uptake.
Well, and the last thing I really want to talk about is it's pretty pertinent to where we're at is fall fertility plans. The one thing that I say that I continue to hear as a very differential of opinions is sulfur. Okay, so I would say in general, today our farmers have a very good grasp on P&K, nitrogen, and looking at the base macronutritionals. Sulfur to me today is a secondary nutrient. Sulfur to me is a primary nutrient, really was what we need to be treating it like. Sulfur is a primary nutrient. It is not a secondary nutrient. It is a primary nutrient that needs to be on the field or at least planned for every year, every application. And I think the biggest thing is I talked to a lot of growers that are putting 10 pounds of sulfur on. I talked to a lot of growers that are putting 20 pounds of sulfur on. I talked to some that are putting 45 on. I think some of what we're looking at is what is that recommendation? And what do you guys see as the, optimum application amount for sulfur?
Well, one thing that dry weather teaches us, it opens up or exposes where we've got opportunities or things that normally you might not see. So if we think about sulfur in particular, through the process of mineralization, Mother Nature's going to give us about 2 to 3 pounds of sulfur for each percent of organic matter we have in that field. When you have dry drought type conditions, you're not getting that mineralization. We saw a lot of fields starting to show some of these issues that normally we just hadn't seen. It was kind of being masked by Mother Nature's ability to provide some free sulfur. I know, Dan, you went out in a couple cases looking at some fields, and it was noticeably a big issue.
Well, we saw one field I was called out to look at, and this field was taken off for silage. And the concern was that the ears were not even beer can size. They were very, very small. And it showed leaf symptomology that something was there. So first thing I did was I asked the grower for the most recent soil test report he had. It was 4 years ago. And then I went and we looked at sulfur, and it was 2 parts per million. It was way below normal. And I asked him, have you done anything in the last 4 years to address sulfur? And he hadn't. So for him, multiple needs of sulfur. And that was one case. And there were many, many fields when you looked at, especially in these stress years, where you could see that leaf symptom of sulfur. And this might be a generalization, Brad, but I think it's really true. I've heard yields, field average yields, and some of these areas were dry, at 75 bushels an acre, where nothing extra was done. It was corn on corn, no trait, no fungicide, 75 bushels an acre. Just up in Kasuth County, all the way to 250 in Webster County with an individual I know that really pays attention to the fertility and the add-ons that they put on. Those people who paid attention to fertility and have paid attention to fertility in stress the last 2 to 3 years have gotten the best yields. Fertility it doesn't drought-proof the corn, but it certainly helps.
Well, and I think that's the biggest thing. So when we look at how we're planning for fertility within Landus, is we've been partnered with Mosaic on their Micro Essentials lineup for a long time. When I look at that, it's a long-term transition. Every acre, whether it's corn or soybeans, needs sulfur. Micro Essentials S10 is what we sell. Has got 10% sulfur, part of the mixture. So if you spread 150 pounds of S10 per acre, you get 15 pounds of sulfur. It's 50% elemental. It's 50% sulfate. All that is readily available for that crop within the cropping year. When I look at that long term, that just has to be part of a cadence. This every year. We're going S10, we're getting X amount of sulfur. Whatever we maybe don't get that we need to, either add some extra, you can add calcium sulfate to the blend, or you can come back in the spring with ammonium thiosulfate.
I think what really excites me about what we've got going on here and some of these products that we can put together, if you think about the dry weather conditions we've had right now, if I go out and take soil samples right now, my numbers are probably going to be a little bit off. In other words, my potassium's probably going to read lower than it really is because it's dry. My percent magnesium may be higher because the ground's settled. I've got compaction going on out there. Sulfur is always a challenge because it is movable in the sulfate form. It can move to that profile. We don't know what Mother Nature is going to give us through the coming winter months and spring months.
Right.
What I like about the product mixes we have, though, is you don't have to, and preferably, I wouldn't take my soil samples in the fall because you don't know what that weather pattern's going to do. Are my numbers really going to be accurate for the crop come spring? So use some of these products, these mixes that we have, take your yield data. There's some great tools out there today that you can plug that yield data in that will give you not just your primary and secondary nutrient levels and the removal rates based on yield, but also your micros. Come in with those micros, put that Pro Coat in that blend, get it out there as quickly as you can. The more time you can give Mother Nature to effectively work on breaking down that phosphorus and that particularly the potash, the better off I'm going to be. The sulfur component applied in the fall, especially in these dry fields, dry conditions, where you see inflated magnesium levels, that sulfur is going to combine with the magnesium to form magnesium sulfate, which we know as Epsom salts. That will flush out. That will improve the profile's ability to move water and air up and down. Then you come in with like a gypsum or a calcium sulfate. Calcium has a bigger molecule, so it can actually increase the porosity within that profile. Then come back and do your soil sampling in the spring. That way you've taken a lot of the weather variability out of what those numbers may be telling us between the fall and the spring. And if you take that sample in the spring, you can fine tune it. Having our new plant online is really exciting to me because you're going to have the ability to actually create a specific blend tailored to that field based on what the soil sample tells us. All too often what I see and what Dan sees in the fall, we take soil samples, we're in a hurry, and we don't get a complete analysis. So we have no idea where we're at on sulfur and zinc and manganese and all these really important micros, boron. With the Pro Coat, we're really killing two birds with one stone. We're already going to make them pass, but I also get my boron, I get my sulfur, I get my zinc. This is just kind of
and I
for lack of a better term, a no-brainer.
Yeah, when I think about it too is, and we're going to talk a little bit more about Pro Coat here right at the end, but when I look at Pro Coat, it's an opportunity to cost effectively get micronutrients on the ground. And one thing I think, we see it all the time with the soil sampling testing that we do, we're never testing really for the full micronutrients. If you're not going to test for the full micronutrients, at least understand what the crop removal is. Because I think what we've really struggled with is, on boron, it's a half a pound of boron for a 200 bushel crop. If you think about it, as you're listening to this, when's the last time you actually applied boron to that crop? It's half a pound per acre for a 200 bushel crop. Again, when's the last time you actually put boron, specifically tried to target that micronutrient? When we look at everything that we're doing with the boron, copper, manganese, zinc Pro Coat product, what we're trying to do is create a really good total farm fertility program that's all around getting that stuff right to where the crop needs it. Or if you're not going to go that route, make sure you're looking at the products that we're then bringing to market out of Boone to help, again, get that micronutrient levels up. We watched the video. Dan and I were together this morning. We watched a video from a grower that talked about, spoon feeding nitrogen's kind of that's kind of on its back burner. Now it's all about how do we really spoon feed micronutrients and incorporate more of micronutrients. So, as always, guys, love having you on. Appreciate your time today. And we're going to be back in October with another one. We'll have a lot more yield results and really be able to talk probably a lot about what we're seeing even at Farnhamville to kind of back up our statements on when we're looking at soybeans long-term. The high management use of soybeans is such a huge payback. And we'll have some really good yield results for everybody on our next podcast to really explain that a little bit further. So as always, guys, appreciate you being here.
Appreciate it.
All right, finally, I just want to thank everybody for joining us this month again on the Grow Podcast, the agronomy segment. I always love doing this. I always love talking to our customers and anybody that's listening about what we're seeing in the market. Kind of finishing up here, obviously we'll be back next month. We're going to talk about some of those yields that we've seen out there in the field, especially with some of the proprietary products that we've been testing this year. The other thing I want to finish up on, and obviously you'll see a lot about it here as we go out through the month on our Landus Twitter, social medias. We're going to be talking a lot about our product called ProCoat. ProCoat's a product that Landus supports through all of their dry fertilizer facilities, and it goes a lot back to the high management, high ability to create yield on micronutrients. So we carry a product called ProCoat BCMZ, which is boron, copper, manganese, zinc. And we also carry a product called ProCoat Zinc. So we have two products at every facility. What we're trying to do with those is really give our customer owners an opportunity to really get to dive into their soil fertility and make micronutrients an added emphasis in what they're doing at a very affordable opportunity. So for ProCoat Zinc, to get a pound of zinc per acre, you're looking at about $4.80 an acre. Okay, comparing that to in-furrow 9% EDTA zinc, you're looking at $8 an acre for 1/4% of zinc. Okay, so what we're trying to do is really create an opportunity and a consistent theme around soil fertility and a product that allows our growers to, one, cost effectively get micronutrients to their crops, and two, something that is I'm going to call it a very efficient way to get to the market, where we're coating our dry fertilizers and creating excess touch points throughout that field for the crop to actually take up and have root interception. So, when we look at a lot of these metals products that we're using, boron, copper, manganese, zinc, they've got to have root interception in the soil in order to take that up. The only way to do that is to really get good, consistent spread. So what we've done is partnered with the ProCoat product to then coat our dry fertilizer and get really good spreadability. Lastly, the one thing I would say about ProCoat BCMZ, we're recommending anywhere from a 12 to 16 ounce use rate per acre. We'll put that up there on roughly what the costs are, but you're looking at $13 to $18 an acre for that application. You're going to get anywhere from 3/4 of a pound to a pound of zinc, 3/4 of a pound to a pound of manganese, half a pound of boron, and about a half a pound of copper. When you look at a product like that, it's providing your entire year's worth of micronutrient values to that crop in one product. And again, like we talked about on the podcast today, that's something I think growers need to continue to look at and push the envelope a little bit on, is understanding, what the ability is for micronutrients and to really enhance your yields. So with that, feel free to call our Growth Solutions Center to ask any more questions about ProCoat. We're going to have some notes here in the show notes as well about ProCoat, as well as Micro Essentials S10 and how that sulfur conversion works on half elemental, half sulfate. And then again, just call our Growth Solutions Center. The team there has got a bunch of information. Just went through training here the other day that I sat a part of to learn a little bit more about these products and really provide you guys with great information and great understanding of what we're doing. So with that, as always, appreciate your guys' business and appreciate you listening to the podcast.